Hello and welcome to the Adam Shilton podcast, where we'll help you level up your life by mastering tech, boosting productivity, and sharpening your skills. I'm your host, Adam Shilton. I'm a top voice technologist and speaker, and I'm on a mission to help you augment your potential. Today, I'm joined by Hasan Kubba, a best-selling author and expert in helping entrepreneurs become published authors. Hasan co-wrote The Unfair Advantage, How You Already Have What It Takes to Succeed, a #1 bestseller and business book of the year. With a background in digital marketing and startup strategy, he now guides clients from famous YouTubers to thought leaders in securing book deals. Hasan's journey from digital nomad to acclaimed author gives him a unique perspective on leveraging unfair advantages in today's digital landscape. In this conversation, we discuss recognizing and leveraging your unfair advantages, AI's impacts on content creation and maintaining authenticity, tips on how to use generative AI without losing your voice, insider tips on book writing and establishing yourself as a thought leader, positioning yourself at the top of the robot curve through creative work, the enduring value of traditional publishing in building credibility, and much, much more. Please enjoy. Hasan, great to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
No worries at all. So we've spoken a couple of times. And they've all been great conversations, hence why I was so keen to have you on. And we're going to talk about loads of stuff. So we're going to talk about unfair advantages. We're going to talk about books. We're going to talk about book writing. We're going to talk about all sorts of stuff. But I thought I'd just give the story about where I first found you. I think it was on the Slow Mo podcast. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. And listeners have heard me talk about Mo before, Mo Gaudat. He was ex-chief Google business officer or?
Yeah,
I think
there's something called Google X, which no one's heard of. It's their moonshot thing, apparently. And he was their chief business officer or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I found him when I was in a bit of a rut. So as many people find, as I'm sure you've found before, you sometimes get to this, crossroads in your life where you think, I've become successful in inverted commas, but then you think, but actually there's something lacking and I'm actually not that happy. And that's where I found Solve for Happy. And we don't need to go into that, but it was a great book off Mo's transformation when, unfortunately, his little boy died, which makes me tear up just thinking about it, really. But then that's how I got into the podcast, So I then started listening to Slow Mo, and then I listened to the podcast with you, and then we connected on LinkedIn, and the rest is history, right? But before we connected on LinkedIn, I bought your book, and I have read it, and I'm in the process of rereading it as we speak. And it's fabulous, and I'll let you speak a little bit more about it. But the first question I wanted to ask is, the title is, go on, you can plug the title.
Oh, The Unfair Advantage of the book. Yeah, The Unfair Advantage, How You Already Have What It Takes to Succeed. That's the subtitle. Yeah.
How You Already Have What It Takes to Succeed. Yeah, that's what I wanted. So the first question is, what are some unfair advantages that people have already that they might not realize they've already got? And I think it'd be a really good place to start.
Sure. So the foundational unfair advantages, the ones that we overlook, the ones that we take for granted, basically the blessings that we don't count, are simply where we were born, where we grew up, like our backgrounds, the passports that we've got, those kinds of privileges. I'm kind of more acutely aware of it than most would be because I was born in Baghdad and I left Iraq at the age of 3 to move to London with my family. And in those 3 years that I lived in Baghdad, which I don't remember, I lived through 2 wars, the Iraq-Iran war and the Gulf War, as they call it now. And so, yeah, it's quite a lot. And it just makes me think, like, if I'd stayed in the 90s in Iraq, I would have grown up with sanctions, and there was basically, Iraq is not a poor country. This is just some context, some background. It's not a poor country. It's an oil-rich country. It's a very oil-rich country. And there used to be they're probably the especially for like the kind of more elite families in Baghdad, their standard of living was probably higher than for those in the UK, especially in the 70s when there was I think there was an oil crisis in the 70s. So for it to have got to the point of malnutrition and sanctions and like these kinds of things in the 90s, and for me to have escaped that, there's a lot to be grateful for. There's a lot of unfair advantages. So basically just taking a step back from everything in the business world, everything in like, to do with like how to, I don't know, grow in your career or make sales or get clients or grow tech startups and raise funding. Just these kinds of basic things. Like if I had to grow, even if we say like if I'd come to the UK when I was like, instead of being age 3, being age 18, let's say, I'd have a thick accent. I wouldn't be able to do keynote speeches. I wouldn't be able to read my own audiobook. I mean, I could. I'll just have a thick accent. It would affect how I'm perceived. And it's just, there's a lot to be grateful for. Just in where you grow up, just in, your background, just in having the right passport. Thankfully, I'm British now, of course. And to be able to travel around the world, there's a lot to be grateful for. So the most basic things that people kind of don't look at is the basics. Basically the stuff that we don't talk about in the world of business, in the world of success. We just take it as a given. Part of that is also health, just to be healthy, or just to not be forced to be a caregiver. That's a big one, right? Like there are kids that are forced from a young age to look after a sick parent, for example. So yeah, those are the ones that are overlooked. And actually the most correlated factor to success, let's call it like business or career success, is actually the postcode that you grew up in. It's your location. It's where you're based. And that is the strongest factor. So I think that is the thing that we need to not overlook.
Yeah. And I suppose the recommendation is like, don't move, like just to give yourself an advantage. But there is, I guess, when you look at trends, like, especially in the UK, London is like the place to be from a like either technology or financial perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you've got that cluster. You have a meeting with somebody, they're probably down the road, or a tube ride away, right?
Yeah.
Same with like Silicon Valley. Similar sort of stuff like that. They end up as incubators where there's almost like this. End up with this flywheel, this like hive of activity that happens.
Mm-hmm.
I think further up north here, Manchester is probably the closest we've got to that sort of hive compared to London in the UK. And I hear now that people are moving, and they were doing this a while ago, but they're moving over to Texas in the States. Austin seems to be like the next phase.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting that people don't often think about their location, but I think it's a really good place to start.
And
anything else you'd add?
Yeah, it's very unequal here in the UK. I'm lucky to have grown up in London. And of course, like it was initially inner city London and kind of like a rundown sort of state school with like, it wasn't kind of the privileged side of London, but still like grew up in London. And UK has that problem a lot more than kind of some other places, let's say, where apart from Manchester as being a bit of an exception, generally being from somewhere up north or just outside of London, it's just going to be different. The opportunities that are available, the jobs, let's say, there's a lot of things. There are some advantages to being from, the less of the, not being based in the hub, not being in London. There are some, corresponding advantages too. We could touch into that, how things are double-edged. But overall, definitely it's like an advantage to grow. Like, for example, I started my business almost straight after university. And one of the big advantages that I had is that I was living at home with my parents. So I didn't have to pay rent in London, which would be crazy. Had I been starting my business from my bedroom, like if I had to pay rent. And so I had access to the local businesses in London and get them as clients. And yeah, so it's a big part of it. So I think it's huge. Location is big.
I'll add something to that. And then I don't want to forget the question that I'm about to ask. So what I'll add is I live in Doncaster in the UK. So it's where I am right now. and it's a lovely little city. It gets a bit of a bad rep. Became a city recently. Went from a town to a city because we had a
Nice.
cathedral and an
Congrats.
airport that closed,
Okay.
and now they're thinking about reopening again. So all sorts of stuff going on here. But cost of living is so much less than in other areas of the country. So my advantage, I guess, is that I studied up north. So I studied in Yorkshire, and I found my wonderful wife here, and that's why I stayed. So my advantage now is reduced cost of living. So now when I run my business, I know that the bills that I have to pay to support my family are going to be a lot less than had I sort of moved back down south to where my parents were. But as you say, it's a double-edged sword, because I get that benefit of being able to live in a wonderful house and my mortgage not being the astronomical rate it would probably be in London. But I don't have that. There's not as much of a high. Don't get me wrong, there's some great stuff going on. And TEDx Doncaster, which was the event a few weeks ago, was amazing. Like, it's only when you get sort of immersed in a community that you understand what's going on. And that was going to be my next question, which is, in a world that's becoming more digital, is it now less relevant location? Do we need to find online communities as another type of unfair advantage, because people are going out less, like people are networking face to face less? So I don't know whether you've got a perspective on that.
Yeah, no, definitely. Look, so location is still really, really important, like physical location, geography, but much less so than before, far less. It's why I was able to kind of do a bit of digital nomading in 2015, 16, 17. I was traveling around Southeast Asia while running my business. And I was doing the whole 4-hour work week style business where I had staff all over the world. I was running a marketing agency. And it's fantastic. It's amazing, So, and ever since, of course, the pandemic and everyone getting more used to video calls and Zoom and all that, it's become much less of a disadvantage. So we do touch on that, thankfully, even though the book is kind of written and it came out 6 weeks before we went into the first lockdown. We do talk about location isn't just the geographic location. It's also like the virtual location. It's also the environment, the kind of influence that's around you, because part of the location is who you're surrounded by. But that's not just a physical thing. That's also, you touched on the concept of online communities. So if you're surrounded by other people who, let's say, have a similar goal to yourself, then you're getting those influences and impacts. And for example, listening to the right podcasts or watching the right YouTube channels, or being part of the right kind of, I don't know, groups or forums or whatever online, online communities. There's, I don't know, Discords and Slacks and all that. So yeah, just like how physically, I mean, another example, just to give an analogy for a business, an unfair advantage is to be in a good location, right? So that's very obvious. But virtually, a good location, and by the way, this is changing a bit now with ChatGPT, but it's where you rank in Google. But in this kind of ChatGPT world, that's changing slightly, but it's just basically how much attention you can get. So now it's just really thinking about in terms of impressions and attention and eyeballs and awareness and etc. So yeah, that definitely plays a huge role, and you can sort of curate your environment by the kind of influences that you get.
And what I'd add to that is the word I'd add to that is intention about who you choose to spend time with online. Because, I mean, reality check, social media isn't a community. Just being on social media is not a community. And if you get into doom scrolling, it can be one of the most depressing places to be, because you get into that category, and I still struggle with this a little bit, of seeing that influencer that is doing the digital nomading. Oh, I'd love to sit on my laptop in Southeast Asia and, get all of that, Vietnamese fur in my face and all of that sort of stuff. But you need to go a level deeper. So, and this is why, and it doesn't matter whether it's like LinkedIn or X or whatever, there needs to be that intention and that active step to make the connection and have the conversation. Because as soon as you start having that conversation that's a level further than just a comment to say, "Oh, great post," like "ha ha ha ha," or right, like "funny gif here," that's where you start to find people that are more in sync with where you are, and it's so much more comforting to be able to drop somebody a message to say, "Oh, look, God, it's mad, this, isn't it? Like everything's so intense. Like I feel like I'm always behind," and somebody echoing that and saying, "Yeah, exactly the same. Like I'm in that position. What can we do to help each other?" Yeah. So as I say, there's a big difference between surface level doom scrolling than there is in making genuine connections with people. But I guess that's just the digital version of what it would be at a face-to-face networking event or like lunch workshop or whatever it happens to be, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So this steps into, because you mentioned ChatGPT there. So GPT search is now a thing. I don't know whether have you seen this?
Yeah, I have.
You did a post about it?
I did one of those. Yeah. I tried out doing a little breaking news little post because I just saw Sam Altman tweet about it, and I was like, "Oh, this is fascinating. We've been waiting for this. Kind of knew this was going to happen." And so I just thought to share it on LinkedIn, just see how. Yeah, let's just share it with people. So yeah, I did.
Yeah. So, and the reason I mention that is because you mentioned about digital real estate. So I think about, I think it was Alex Hormozy, or it was in one of the books, probably at $100 million leads or something like that, which is a good book, especially if you're looking to increase sales, obviously. But he distills it into, there's only a certain amount of ways that you can find people. Yeah, either it's cold outreach, warm outreach, content, or affiliates, or whatever they are, right? And essentially, the concept is either you work to create that digital real estate organically by way of content, so SEO, blog posts, good quality content, that sort of stuff, or you pay for it in the form of paid ads. At the moment, Google, Bing ads, whatever it happens to be, and now on social media, LinkedIn ads, Instagram ads, Facebook ads, and all of that sort of stuff. But it will be fascinating to see how that progresses with these AI searches. In my view, they're going to merge. But because businesses are still going to want a way of being able to capture an audience without having to invest all of that time in creating organic content, right? So I wouldn't be at all surprised if there's either an OpenAI or a Perplexity or whatever version of AdWords on their platforms. It will just be, and I think we saw this in Bing Chat. I don't know whether you used Bing Chat before it was rebranded as Copilot, but you'd have the responses and the web searches, and some of the little hyperlinks had numbers on them and they pop up with adverts. I don't know whether you saw that.
I remember playing with it a bit, but I can't remember the ads specifically.
Yeah. So I think we'll see that moving in that direction, because let's not forget, advertising is one of the biggest ways for these big companies to make money, right?
100%.
They're shooting themselves in the foot if they don't offer that opportunity, right?
Yeah. But I could also imagine the paid versions maybe being ad-free if they charge enough of a subscription. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting what happens next. It's really interesting. The first time Google gets disrupted, which is crazy. It's the first time Google actually has a real threat.
Yeah, absolutely. I see Gemini pop up on my phone now. I see Gemini appear in the search results, and I had a friend of mine send me some of the Google Gemini AI developer stuff that I haven't dug into the background of yet. I will at some point. So it still exists, it's still there, but unfortunately, the other companies have kind of got the lion's share of the attention now. I feel like it's a battle between OpenAI and Anthropic at the moment in terms of chatbots. Is it Claude or is it ChatGPT? Then we've got the contender that is Meta.
Yeah.
Because from an individual level, they're building it into WhatsApp now, and it's becoming more and more real. I don't think we can get it in the UK yet, though. I tried it a few days ago, but I think it's still limited. I might give it another go. So yeah, it would be interesting to see how Meta starts trying to chip in a little bit more, because their Llama 3.1 model is actually pretty good. Like it beat ChatGPT with my little word task. I asked it to create a story where every word began with a W.
Interesting.
And ChatGPT actually failed. Like it put "and" in. So Yeah. So it'd be interesting to see how that battle goes. But at the moment, people don't equate Google with AI. So they're at a disadvantage at the moment. They don't have an unfair advantage anymore.
Yeah, agreed. And it's just a threat to them. The thing is, will they survive this? Yeah, probably. But it's the first time that they're not so dominant. That's the crazy part. And so, yeah, it's just fascinating what's happening.
Yeah. So let's try and move more into the sort of stuff that you're doing right now, which is books.
Yeah.
So I've always been a bit of a, I won't say prolific reader, because I'm a slow reader.
Okay.
Yeah. And I say slow reader. I'm getting better at picking out the bits that I actually want to read. I think if you, and you can probably attest to this. I think once you've read enough books, you know that there's going to be a certain amount of preface and intro that sets the scene. You know that probably you're going to get the essence of most concepts from the last paragraph, and some authors are nice enough to give bullet point summaries at the end of each chapters, right? So some books, depending on my perceived value, I will do them literally just so that I can go to the highlights and focus on the bits that are most relevant to the challenge that I'm facing at that moment in time.
Yeah.
Whereas other books, I will literally read end to end. So the one that I'm reading end to end at the moment is The Singularity is Nearer. So the author is Ray, and I'm probably going to mess up his second name. Ray Kurzweil. Yeah, there we go. So I mean, Bill Gates, celebrates him for his intellect and being able to make predictions like that sort of stuff. And because I really want to get immersed in that, it's not like a tactical book for me.
Mm.
Yeah, it's more of a, I need to get immersed in that. I need to have almost like a mind shift, like mind altering experience reading that book, rather than it just being a tactical book. And no discredit to Ali, because it is a fantastic book, feel good productivity. And obviously, Hassan, we can go. I want to talk about your storyboard session there, because I think it was really good, the way that you explained that in the blog article. But that for me is an incredibly useful tactical book.
Yeah.
And it is structured in a way that makes it incredibly useful. And it is hilarious as well. Like, and you probably attest to this, like his writing style in terms of his anecdotes and metaphors.
Yeah.
It's funny, and it makes it all the more immersive. I really love it. So, but before we get into that process of talking through what maybe you do to sort of distill the essence and, differentiate from an average book and a good book, is just staying on that AI thread for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Because I remember reading not too long ago, and I say not too long ago, time flies, so it might have been months, it might have been a year, that Amazon had to start putting limits on the amount of submissions that it would accept from publishers, because people were literally just using ChatGPT to write books. And one strategy I saw, and I mean, it was genius at the time, right? Because it was like hyper efficient, is people were looking at existing books on Amazon. They were looking at the reviews, looking at the negative reviews or the average reviews to see what the book was lacking and what they weren't getting from that, and then using ChatGPT to write pretty much exactly the same book, but refocused to tackle some of the subject matter that wasn't received from the feedback and the review. So like, I guess, like, really, really smart idea, right? But for me, there's just something like there's a shortcut, and then there's cheating, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I get stuck a little bit. Like, I'm fundamentally against the premise of using AI to produce something and passing it off as your own work. So I don't know what you're seeing and how we can sidestep that. What is the appropriate use of AI in this context? But like, you are the book guru, so lay your perspective on me.
So yeah, I have an so at the moment, and the way LLMs work, so ChatGPT, Claude, whatever it is, Gemini, Llama, is it's predicting what statistically, it's so weird that this is what it's doing. So behind the scenes, what it's actually doing is predicting the most likely next word, which is so weird. it's a statistical analysis of what is likely the next word based on the context of the conversation and the prompts and the questions, etc. And it's incredible what it's producing. This is like an emergent kind of result that no one was really expecting it to be this good. And so this is why it's like such a big shift. It's a paradigm change. It's disrupting so much. And whenever there's disruption, there's a lot of opportunity. And some of it is kind of like opportunistic and arbitrage and short term, like what you're describing with people jumping in and publishing books, which just by kind of, collating or amalgamating all the different reviews and seeing, okay, where can we improve it? And then just getting ChatGPT to do it.
Mm.
Whenever in life, in business, whatever, anything, where the barriers of entry barriers to entry go down because something becomes much easier, something which would have taken hours and hours and hours of human labor and thinking to kind of even figure out what all the reviews are saying, to figure out where the gaps in the market are, what the best-selling books are, and then to rewrite that based on the reviews. It's a crazy amount of work. And then you get like, an LLM like ChatGPT or something, and it can just spit it out in like in a few seconds, which is just mind-blowing. What's my point? My point is, when it's a statistical analysis of what's the most likely next word, and this is the key concept, you're going to end up almost by definition with something quite mediocre and mundane. It's almost a circular argument that what you're going to end up getting is mediocre. Now, you can introduce more variability, more insight, more profoundness with better prompting. But then it goes back into being an art, because now you're prompting it so well that you're having to really think about what you're saying to prompt it, that it goes back to being an art like writing was in the first place, but easier in some sense, but harder in others. So what it does for writers in general is, if you're a below average writer, you'll bring you up to average, which is amazing. So it's bringing the bottom up. The floor for writing skills come up. The ceiling hasn't changed, or hardly changed, let's say. Most people that I know, and most authors that I speak to, and even have heard from podcasts, etc., will say, they barely use it for the actual writing because it only just slows them down. I think that's not going to stay that way. It's still going to become a much better tool, but ultimately you'll still end up with the person using the tool to actually get the best out of it. So what's happening is, whenever you have barriers to entry go down, let's use an example for that. Now, it might seem like a very different example, but it's in the book realm, which is when self-publishing became an option. Print on demand, Amazon gave it as a thing that you could do, where you can just self-publish a book. It's actually what we were going to do with our book, The Unfair Advantage. Actually, I've got this self-published version here. So if you're watching this on video, I'm holding up a very different looking cover to what we ended up with as our book cover. It's called it's The Unfair Advantage, with a different subtitle: Boost Your Chances of Tech Startup Success. And it's got a little badge on it that says lean version. And that's because we were optimizing for the keyword lean because of the lean startup, and because it's the minimum viable product. It's the lean version. It's the minimum viable book. So we were going to self-publish before we got a publishing deal. And this is a very relevant kind of example. Self-publishing allows anyone to be a publisher. Have you seen how many people say that they're a best-selling author on LinkedIn or wherever? It's a crazy number. You think, how could they all be best-selling? I'll tell you how. Because Amazon has this kind of bestseller chart, which updates, like, I believe every hour, depending on how niche it is, very often, let's say. And based on the velocity of sales, so how many sales in the last hour or few hours or whatever day, I don't know, it updates the bestseller list. And so if you just put yourself in a small enough little, category for a book, social anthropology for, I don't know what, for the for sub-Saharan Africa, I don't know. That's not even specific enough. Something even more specific, you can get to number one really quickly just by having like 3 sales. So they can become best-selling authors. So what's happened? Becoming best-selling author per se is losing its cachet. It's like inflation. The more you have of it, the less valuable it becomes. And therefore, the more valuable it becomes to be traditionally published. This brings me on to why I coach and consult people who want traditional publishing deals, because it's become more valuable to get traditionally published, to go through the gatekeepers of the traditional publishing world. As much as, all the fancy futuristic gurus will be like, yeah, self-publishing is the future. But hold on, everyone can self-publish. So how are you making yourself stand out? And actually, if you'll only be able to sell a lot of copies if you have a big audience. But look at the people with big audiences. They're going to traditional publishers. They're not self-publishing. That's for a reason. It's because they want it for credibility. So I'm using that to give you an idea of my coaching, but also to explain how, as something becomes commoditized, as something becomes, the barriers to entry go down, mediocre let's say decent writing, like good enough writing, becomes more accessible to everyone. Now it's more special to write well. Now it's more special to have unique perspective or unique ideas or unique insights or have original thinking or original frameworks, because it can't really come up with something truly original, not really, because it's just going to average out what it's come across in the past. That's how it works. It's basically scanned all the internet and all of Reddit, as you'll notice, and all previous books that have come out of copyright to predict what the next word was going to be. And therefore, almost by definition, it's not going to be something very original or very unique or very standout. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter to me. There's no distinction between writing that's done by ChatGPT. Like if somebody wrote a great book by ChatGPT, but like it's really great, like I'm really absorbed in it, it's got really insightful things, I don't care that it's written by ChatGPT. It does not matter to me one bit. I'm not a purist that way. I think that as long as it's good, because that means that there's been a lot of work in prompting it right, a lot of work and a lot of thinking and a lot of mind space. And therefore it's the same thing. It's like saying, oh, it's not fair for my accountant is using a calculator or a spreadsheet. It's like, what? But that's what you want. You want them to use it. If they're not using it, that's silly. I don't care if they could do amazing mental maths and do that finger thing. Have you seen those kids that do the finger thing with the abacus in their heads to do mental maths? It's incredible. This is like viral on social media. But it doesn't matter. I don't want my accountant to do amazing mental maths. That doesn't matter to me. I want him to be able to use spreadsheets and to get me the best result. And so that's how we have to view LLMs. And that's my little spiel about using ChatGPT as an author. You have to think about how you need to be even more special to stand out now. Same with online content. We both talk about posting on LinkedIn. It's okay to use ChatGPT, but it's not okay for it to be obvious someone's using ChatGPT, because it's obvious because it's not good, right? That's the key. That's the thing. And because there's nothing profound. It's full of platitudes, and it's very meh and just mediocre and just like whatever. Who cares?
Really quick, guys. As you know, I don't have sponsors on the show. So to help me, it would be great if you could share with just one other person, leave a review, give a thumbs up, and subscribe. It really does make a difference. Now back to the show.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that as well. So I had to call out a couple of my LinkedIn commenters today because I'd had enough of it. So AI generated LinkedIn comments are a thing, and people do it to try and increase their following. Get AI to auto write 20 comments a day so that they don't have to think about it. But they always take the wording from your post. It very rarely adds something new. They quite often include an emoji or finish with a question, so you can spot them a mile off as well. Anyway, that mini rant aside, the bar has gone up in terms of what good looks like on LinkedIn and on other platforms as well, because there's so many people now that are using these tools to post. And I think this is why we're seeing so much success with stories and selfies on LinkedIn, because it adds that human element back. The top performing posts that I've seen in the past few months have been I started here with a picture of a dude that's like stood in the council estate that you grew up in and going through that transformation. 2 years ago I was here. 10 years ago when I started my career. It like draws people in, and people can identify that. So I think people are craving more of that human element now, to the point where there's even hints that some of the algorithms on the platform might start favoring video more soon. And again, who knows how the algorithm works, but video could be argued is more real than text, until it gets to the point where obviously the video emulation emulates the person in the same way that ChatGPT emulates the text version, right? So it's going to be an infinite battle, but probably no different to technological advances of the past. It's just happening a lot quicker, right?
Absolutely. And I think the key discussion here, the key mental model for this is signal versus noise. And it's just the amount of noise that's going out now, because the cost to creating content and just like blah, like kind of just meh content, just noise, just nonsense, has just become the cost to doing that has gone so low that people can just do it. Like bots can do it. They can get even these comments that are just meaningless. It's just causing that inflation again that we spoke about. And that's why you have to really stand out by making it personal, or making it original, or making it truly insightful, have true perspective. And you can't just get away with regurgitating advice, because ChatGPT is brilliant at just regurgitating advice. And that's not going to be a way to stand out anymore.
And to come back to your point about that voice that you sometimes get if you can prompt well enough.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like how do we go from generic to like well-written AI content? But I'd ask people the question, and I need to test this. Was it more useful, and did it produce better content to be prompting the AI to produce that output? Or would it have been better if you'd just asked yourself those questions? Do you know what I mean? Because and the example I'll give is the newsletter, right? So I try and do a weekly newsletter, but I'm rubbish at it, right? I'm rubbish at consistency with everything. Everything tends to be last minute. You know, it's just how it is at the moment. And I thought, right, well, it would be really good if I could have, and I've been doing it more with Claude recently, but if I could have Claude do a first draft for me, and then I'm using AI as the junior content writer, say, for example. Yeah, so these are the themes that I want to talk about. Come up with 3 or 4 newsletter ideas, come up with the structure, try and use my tone of voice, even though I know it's not going to be the same. And then what I can do is I can pick it up and I can at least use the base structure, but then rewrite the elements that fit my story, that I have expertise on, that I can add my perspective, right? So I did that and got to the point where I was like adding previous versions of my historical newsletters and doing a really complicated prompt to say, oh, make sure that you do this and don't do that, and or whatever. The first time I did it, the result came up on the page and I thought, oh no, that looks really good. Like, yeah, that's structured in the same way. And yeah, no, it looks like it uses some of my terminology. And then as I started editing it, I rewrote the whole thing. That there was probably 5% of it that was maybe like a quote, for example, that I'd read once and forgotten about it. And I thought, oh yeah, I wish I'd included that quote. Thank you, AI, for producing that little nugget of information that was really useful, just to add a little bit more context there. But now thinking back, I'm thinking, what if I just started from scratch? Do you know what I mean? And I prompted myself in a better way. Would that have been quicker? Would it have needed to have been quicker? Is the quality of my work better as a result? So maybe I need to do a bit of A/B testing there. But yeah, I think what you were saying previously about the authors, actually using it to stop staring at a blank page, but actually still doing a lot of the heavy lifting themselves, I think that speaks volumes.
Yeah. And also it's very good. Like, it's good at certain things. Like, it's good at, like, one of the best things it's good at is sort of idea generation. Like, they could be crap ideas, but it could just be like, give me 5 examples of this, give me 5 headlines. And it's like, they could be crappy and you need to push back and keep saying, no, do this instead. No, try this. But it's just so efficient at doing that. And it can just trigger ideas, just like the quote that you had. It could just trigger things that you'd forgotten about. And I think it's really good at doing that. I think it depends on it depends on your personality. It depends on your writing style, which one's better for you, to start from a blank page and just forget about it. But I would say, as much as possible, try to use it as much as possible. And then feel free to edit and stuff and put your own spin on it, because definitely it's not going to, there's still going to be a last mile of those final polishing edits that you need to do to really make it sing, to make it really good. Because if you don't get in the habit of using it, this is the worst it will be, kind of thing. Like it's only going to get better. And I think it's just a case of make it a habit to use it all the time and figure out what it's good for. I get frustrated with it all the time where I'm like, this is so crap. This is awful. Like I need to, I just get frustrated with it sometimes. And, but then you realize how to prompt it differently, or just start a new chat if you just get really annoyed and it can lose context and just forget the previous stuff you spoke about and just start a new one and just reprompt it. I have Google Docs with different prompts where I've preloaded all this information to give it context about me. You have to really, who are you? You know, who are you writing for? What is your objective? You have to kind of tell it that every time. And you can also give it a role and say, you are this. You coach me into, like, instead of getting it to write, sometimes you can say, be my writing coach and coach me into writing this. Or use it to evaluate, use it to edit and say, evaluate how good this would be as a hook. Or who might have I forgotten about? Or my target audience are these people. What are their biggest pain points? And then just, you might have forgotten about some of those. And then you go, okay, yeah, what's great is when it then tells you that, and you go, okay, do it for this pain point. And it can write something, and it's not going to be amazing, and it's like, but it's very useful. So I spend a lot of time doing that, and I encourage others to do the same, because, again, you're only going to fall behind. It's like refusing to use a calculator. You're only going to fall behind.
So something that might help you, and I know we said we might have this conversation offline at some point, which I'm still happy to do, but we might as well talk about it now as well. So with both ChatGPT and Claude, you've got the ability to create bots or projects. And so in ChatGPT, it's called GPTs.
Yeah.
So
custom
you can
GPTs,
create a bot.
Custom GPT.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So you can build your own GPT, and you can have it just for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some people don't realize that. They think, oh, I don't want to build a bot and put it in a marketplace. That's not it. Like, you can build bots just for your own use as well. And you can add knowledge. So what you're saying there about having to provide context each time, you don't have to do that with a bot, because it's built into the base instruction. Yeah, so that's one thing to look at. I don't know whether they've made them free yet. They said that with GPT-4o they were going to make GPTs free, but they also said that they were going to make web search free as well. But I believe last time I checked, it's only available in the pro version, which I use.
Yeah.
So that's one option. But the other one that I found more useful recently, and I don't want to give a bias, it's not what I'm about. I use both, and I try and get the use cases for both, just so that I can get a balanced perspective with these things. I don't use Gemini, but no, I'm joking. But Claude, they call it projects, because I think they're focusing more on the sort of like the B2B type team stuff. So when you see the collateral and the marketing stuff for Claude, they're trying to say, bring your team onto the same page with shared knowledge, whereby you can work together using AI as your assistant. So it could be, as I say, it could be a brand project. You could upload images that relate to your tone of voice, as well as, marketing copy or whatever it happens to be. And then you can have multiple members of the team chat the bot, and then they're always going to be presented with something that's business specific, because that documentation and that knowledge base is given the context. Now, the nice thing about Claude is you can upload what is the equivalent of a 500-page book into the knowledge, because the context window is so big. And that was one of the big limitations with ChatGPT when they first released GPTs, is you could upload knowledge, but then you found that the responses were really rubbish the more knowledge you uploaded, because you were consuming from the context window. Yeah. Whereas in Claude, it works really well. So I'll give you a couple of examples of what I've used Claude projects for.
Nice.
And then we'll go back to...
I just want to give a shout out to custom instructions as well. Can give it context in ChatGPT.
Yeah, they're really good. So there's a couple that I've got. So one of my Claude projects is content production. Now, I'm not going to backtrack and say that I use it to create my posts for me. Yeah? And this is what I wanted to talk about when you said about, knowledge. What was the word that you used? I can't remember the exact word that you used. But essentially, I use the project to upload frameworks as knowledge. So frameworks I find are the best way to get the large language model to home in on a methodology. Yeah. So giving context and saying act as an expert, marketer or whatever is good, and it's better than not giving any context. But if you say act as a marketing whatever using this framework, so for example, AIDA, like attention, interest, desire, whatever, the results become infinitely better as well. So in my content, or whatever it's called, content production assistant, I've got examples of good hooks, which relates to that attention piece. I've got example frameworks that do validation. So best practices for making sure that it's engaging, stops the scroll or whatever. So it's not used from a writing perspective. What I'll often do is I'll paste what the post is or the piece of content in, and I'll say to it, using your knowledge, i.e. the frameworks and the examples, please validate this. Give me instructions on how to make it better. So that's a really good use case that I found there. I've got a life coach that I've uploaded my bio and my challenges and my current struggles, and I use it for journaling.
Nice.
So I say, take me through a journaling exercise based on my bio in your knowledge, and it knows everything about me. And I'm happy to do it with Claude because Claude doesn't use your data to train the model. I'd never used to do that sort of stuff in ChatGPT because as much as you can opt out from the data, I still felt a little bit like, I wasn't confident in how secure it was going to be. But anyway, to save me from going off on a complete tangent about how I use AI to run my life, we should probably rein it back in. But I don't know whether that's useful or not, but I found it quite useful. Very using that.
Yeah, we'll speak to you off camera even more about just share notes of how we're using it. Because I was doing something similar for journaling, etc. Kind of, like having some back and forth with like a live coach. It was interesting. It was very interesting experiments I've been personally running. So yeah.
I'll share you the first output that I had of a gratitude coach. So I set it up to do a gratitude practice. Sometimes I'll do a pen and paper and I'll do a gratitude practice, but sometimes, and it sounds so silly, but sometimes I don't want to pick up a pen and paper. So the gratitude coach was essentially well. It was a lazy approach, right? So the custom instruction was act as a gratitude approach, use short questions to focus on the gratitude areas, and it's exactly that. Like, what's one thing that you're grateful for, and then it just goes a little bit more into the weeds. So yeah, I'll share all of that with you.
And I like the audio. I like the chat. with the voice chat you can have with ChatGPT. So I could just walk and talk to it and just journal or have a coach or whatever, which is awesome.
100%. Yeah, 100%. Even though you can't have Scarlett Johansson voice anymore, they've taken it down.
Exactly.
But there we go. So no, I want, and we're probably not going to have enough time to go through all the questions I want to ask. So maybe we do a round 2 at some point. But what I really wanted to ask you about, and you mentioned this a little bit in terms of that creativity piece that essentially means that we have to level up. Yeah, but we need to get better, right? And what I'm finding is it's becoming more and more about finding your essence and your voice and becoming unique. So to frame this a little bit more, I've been speaking about something called the robot curve recently, which was referenced in a book called Meta Skills, 5 Talents for the Future of Work by a dude called Marty Neumeier, which is a really good book. But he references the robot curve, and the robot curve is robotic work at the bottom, obviously the stuff that can be bought, algorithmic type stuff, whether it's a software tool or now an AI. You've then got rote work, which is the stuff that can be outsourced. Yeah, so think about like Upwork and all of that sort of stuff where you don't need in-house skilled people for. Like think of overseas labor and that sort of stuff, or overseas resource. Then you've got skilled work, which is what we class as knowledge work. Yeah, so it is directed. So very few people do it autonomously because they've still got a boss. Yeah, and they are competitive skills. Yeah, so you work in sales and marketing. Your skills are digital marketing. They are new business development and so on and so forth. And then you've got level 1, which is the creative level, which is autonomous creative work, which is undirected, stuff that you do off your own back. as a means of differentiating yourself, and again, to use another Alex Hormozy term, becoming one of zero. Yeah. So what is that essence that makes you the creative you that can't be replaced? Yeah. That nobody else can do because you are so unique in that area. So I set that frame because I know that when you were guiding Ali through the concept for his book, that there was sort of a lot of conflicting ideas, you know. So I don't know whether you can lend any thoughts to how people can start thinking about the essence of what they want to talk about, how they can get to that point of differentiation. But I just wanted to ask you, because it's been something that I've been thinking about a lot recently.
Yeah. So for context, in case people don't know, so what I've been doing is helping people to work. Okay, it's a quick step back. The biggest misconception, just about this is relevant to the whole Ali Abdaal thing. The biggest misconception is that to get a book deal from a publisher, to be a published author, you know, what I was referring to earlier as standing out from like the self-published masses, is to have an audience, is to be famous, to have a lot of followers. Now, of course, that is a huge, to use a word for my book, a huge unfair advantage. And it's definitely super, super helpful in getting a book deal is to have a big audience. However, it is not necessary. You can get a book deal by just having a great book concept. And that's my whole thesis, is like, I can help you. And I mean, I've worked with big creators, and Ali Abdaal being the most famous, the biggest one that I've worked with. But I also work with people who have no following, you know, but have accomplishments, have ideas, are thought leaders in some way, want to establish themselves as thought leaders, to get book deals and to become bestsellers, like the legit, not just the Amazon bestsellers, but the actual on the bestseller list, etc. And so when I was working with Ali to help him get a book deal and write, you know, have a great killer book concept, what we focus on is what is his unfair advantage, you know, in terms of his status. Mostly that's based on the journey that the author's been on. So to have credibility in a space, it's good to have very sort of explicit, clear success in that space. So quick example is, no matter how good the advice of somebody on stage talking about fat loss is, if he's morbidly obese, doesn't matter if everything he's saying is amazing and really on point, you can't get past, but then why are you morbidly obese telling me this? You just can't. You have to. And that's why the fitness advice always comes from somebody with a topless picture on the front cover and a six-pack, you know, pretty much. If it's not on the front cover, it's somewhere in the inside, you know, in the inside jacket. And that's the key. The key is, do you practice what you preach? Are you clearly somebody who's credible in this space? So, you know, we're going to want to read a book about sort of business success from, you know, let's say Steve Jobs' biography, right? We want to learn. And Ali Abdaal got famous for productivity on YouTube. And the whole thing that everyone used to ask him is, how could you be a doctor and going through medical school and then a junior doctor, and at the same time be doing YouTube and growing a YouTube channel? And he's now at 5 million subscribers. And the whole thing is like, well, here's how I manage my time. Here's how I'm so productive. That was his main thing that he's known for. And so basically that is it. Number one is, what's the kind of, where do you have authority, or where do you have clear sort of explicit external success? You know, it's hard when it's something like, oh, I'm in the piece. It's like, that's tough. And that's why, you know, you have Jay Shetty kind of saying, I was a monk, because you need to establish some kind of, it's hard to establish credibility in that space. When it comes to wealth, they have a photo. I mean, I'm saying the stereotypes. Either they're known, they're on the rich list, you know, on the Forbes rich list, or they're standing in front of a Lamborghini. You know, that's the kind of stereotype, right? And there's a reason for that stereotype. So that's the key. The key is, look for where your unfair advantages, including your status, including what you've accomplished, overlaps with what you like to talk about, where you love to discuss, where you have expertise in or insights in, and also overlaps with what your audience wants to know. That's it. It's those three kind of, or to simplify it, I have a Venn diagram that I've taught to my clients and my students in the past of online courses, etc. Is where do your unfair advantages overlap with what your audience wants to hear? Simple as that. And it's mostly that's going to be your credibility or what you've accomplished. It can also be, to some extent, your perspective or the journey that you're on. Sometimes there are some people who can write very well about how I'm not a guru in this space, but I'm figuring out like you. So rather than, what's that phrase? Rather than a sage on the stage, they're a guide from the side. They're just like a few steps ahead of them, or they're just a relatable character to go through. An example that comes to mind is Alex Benayan, A Third Door. Do you know that book?
Yeah.
So Alex Benayan,
you mentioned it. Not read it yet, but yeah.
So Alex Benayan is like a young author, a bit like myself, kind of in his 20s when I think he wrote his books. And he doesn't present himself as like some kind of guru. He's just like, look at me as I go through this journey of speaking to the most successful people in the world. So there's also that path. But yeah, I hope that kind of, does that answer your question of like, where do you start from in the brainstorm for the book concept? That's where we start from. What are your unfair advantages? What do your audience want to know? What is there a market for? Kind of that simple.
And then it's the differentiator. So it's because all that we're talking about here is very firmly at the top of that robot curve that says, look, we're in this creative space where we've got a unique perspective to give that can't just be regurgitated by an AI or like any other knowledge worker on the planet, right? Yeah. But it's interesting what you said there about the intersection of what you want to talk about and what your audience want.
Yeah.
Firstly, the challenge is, if you've got a lot of experience in a lot of different places, and I'm sure everybody that's gone through a career and held multiple different roles and built skills in different areas like I have, whether it's like tech, sales and marketing, so on and so forth. And I start thinking, right, well, I could talk about a load of stuff, but what's going to resonate the most with my audience? And I guess the short answer to the question is, well, you're not going to know until you get feedback from the market. So you need to at least put stuff out there for people to register. But it still doesn't help sometimes, where you think, you've got so much to give, you've got so much to talk about. You sometimes feel like you're limiting yourself by trying to distill it too much. But you need to, because otherwise people aren't going to be able to associate you with something. Yeah. Because you need to get to the point eventually where people say, oh, yeah, I know about Hassan because he helps people like get their books signed with major publishers and smash it there, or you see what I say? Like it's that how do you build that association, not knowing 100% what you want to be associated with?
Yeah, it takes time to figure that out. And the biggest problem is people often want to. So I have this a lot with clients in the past, where it's like they've got success in a certain area. Like let's say they're super successful tech startup founders who've had exits, sold their companies for millions or even hundreds of millions sometimes. And they're like, yeah, I want to talk about like happiness and contentment. And you're like, is that what people want to hear from you? Or do people want to hear, how did you grow such a big business? But that's very common actually, because what's usually the case is they want to talk about what they're thinking about, which is what they're either something they've just overcome, or usually there's something that they're overcoming now. So somebody on some kind of fitness transformation who has like an amazing career wants to talk about the fitness thing sometimes. Not always, but sometimes that's what they want to coach people on, is fitness. And you're like, but like people want to hear about how you made millions working part-time as a contractor. How did you manage to do that? And that's what people want to hear from you. But you instead want to talk about weight loss and how you've learned about this keto thing. And so that's really, really common. I had it a little bit myself to an extent. When my book came out, so the book is about startup success, and I have a lot of background in marketing and startup and positioning and branding and tech startup fundraising, etc., etc. I've got loads of knowledge in that space. What did I actually want to talk about? Like you can see, like I think the first YouTube video I did when I was experimenting a bit with YouTube, which I'm hopefully going to go back to, is I talked about story structure. And it's like, yeah, there's some overlap with like being an author, but like I'm not a fiction book writer. It's not really about stories per se. It's more about like thought leadership. Well, there I am talking about story structure. Why? Because I just learned it and I found it fascinating. And so that's often a pitfall, just to point out, that people fall into, is that they're like, yeah, I've done all that. Yeah, I've had that amazing success in my career. I've sold this business, or I was a CEO for this huge company, or whatever. And then like, but now I want to talk about yoga. It's like, yeah, that's fine. Like, passion is great, but it's like you have to find that sweet spot where you can find some passion, but also some overlap of what you've accomplished and what your unfair advantages are of what you've done, what your status is, and that's the key.
So I'll ask you one last question. I think it might be a nice place to wrap up before you can tell people more about where they can find you and all of that sort of stuff. So you said previously that you did the sort of digital nomad piece. You know, you're running a marketing agency from a laptop in Southeast Asia. And of course, you know, you released the Unfair Advantage. So you are a writer and an author. And now you are helping writers and authors. So it'd be nice to know a little bit more about how you've ended up where you are now on that journey and saying this is what I'm about, because it sounds like it's a pretty good journey to be fair.
Yeah.
Like how have you ended up deciding that this is the right stage for you right now?
Yeah, so it's a lot about, it's basically what we've just kind of spoken about. I think I've lived it, which is, number one is self-awareness, it's self-knowledge, just know thyself. And honestly, that's been such a long journey for me. It's so funny. It's just like that typical thing of like, it's taken me ages to know what I like and what I'm good at, or to even, it's like when I look back, the hints were there, the clues were there, but at the time I didn't know it. So, for example, I'll give you an example. When I first started my business, my first target market for my marketing agency was I actually still have the first draft of my website back in 2012, which is authors. I think it says something like authors, experts, consultants. Do you want to grow your following? Something like that. And authors was like, I think like the first word, I believe, or maybe it was experts, authors, consultants, something like that. And so look, like clearly my interests lie there, but I didn't know explicitly that that's what I wanted to be, an author. I genuinely didn't think that. I thought maybe once I'm in my 40s or 50s, you know, I'm old at that time. I'm in my mid 20s, so it's very old to be in your 40s. Only then would I write a book, right? Not knowing that I'd be in my 20s and get a book deal with a big publisher and then get a US book deal, etc. So that was the interesting thing looking back. So anyway, what I was doing, I learned about marketing. And specifically the only part of the marketing agency which I wasn't outsourcing is the copywriting. Interestingly, I was doing that myself. And there's a clue there looking back that, okay, I wanted to do the writing myself because I was so fascinated, not in writing per se. I was never like that interested in writing. I was never big on, like my favorite subject at school was science. It wasn't like English or something. But I think I loved the puzzle of like, how do you tap into those emotions? There's this kind of art to copywriting, etc. So I was doing that myself. So that was interesting. And then I always never had the vision to grow a big agency, which is why I did shut it down after in about 2019. Completely closed it down. And that's because it was an SEO agency, and I could see that SEO was, I could either re-evolve the agency to be mostly about something else. It was a full service agency, but the killer product, the service, was SEO, because that was the one that was giving me the passive income. That was the real one that was giving me that passive income, because it was like a recurring revenue type thing. But I could see it was going down. I could see like the signs were there, and I was like, I need to get out of this before. I mean, it still exists. People still make money in SEO, but I could see that it was going to be less and less effective to get clients through SEO, because Google was getting greedy and getting people to pay for clicks rather than getting organic traffic. So my idea was I wanted to learn marketing and learn the ropes and do an agency to then do marketing for myself, for my own product or service. I didn't know exactly what that was going to be, but eventually like that ended up being consulting / coaching. And so in 2020, the book came out, and I was a general business coach, and I was working with tech startups. I was working with early stage YouTubers. I was working with really established YouTubers and course creators. And so it was quite broad. If you want to kind of, okay, how can I categorize what I was doing? It was sort of positioning, branding, thought leadership, content, organic content. I was never like into ads and pay-per-click stuff. So And then this year, 2024, is when I decided, and I worked with a few kind of authors, but this year is when I decided, let's niche down even further. And it's kind of painful to do that, but it's like, that's what I've been advising others to do. I know that's the advice, is to niche down and to work only with those who want to become authors. So usually they're entrepreneurs, business leaders, coaches, consultants, speakers, and online creators, like educational creators. Those are the ones who I work with. I help them develop their book concepts. I help them write. I stop them. I tell them, stop writing a book. You need a book proposal, not a book. I help them write a book proposal. I introduce them to literary agents and publishers. I help them to get a book deal. And I help them to get paid to write a book as opposed to pay others to write a book, which is what happens when you're self-publishing or going to a hybrid publishers. And I help them to establish their thought leadership and their brand. Like, for example, someone like Ali Abdaal, he's got more than 5 million subscribers on YouTube, absolutely huge audience. Why did he write a book? And why did he get a traditional publisher? Credibility. To break through into the mainstream. To be known as a YouTuber is not respected in the mainstream as being an author is. And it just shows that I'm an expert in this space. So, and then for business, I've got people who had multiple IPOs I'm working with right now. I've got people who've just made millions in their early 20s and they want to write a book. It's really interesting. So I love this space. I specifically focus on concept development. I love concept development of like, what's the big idea? The unfair advantage is a concept. It's an idea. The feel-good productivity, it's an idea. It's the concept is productivity is not about discipline and gritting your teeth and pushing through. It's actually finding joy. And that's how having fun. That's the concept. I love coming up with these concepts and helping co-develop concepts with my clients. And that's what I do now. I just do that. I work with clients to develop book proposals, get book deals, and then sometimes they want me to help them write the book as well.
Amazing. Well, I can think of a few people already that might want to speak to you. But in the meantime, where can people find out more about you?
HasanKubba.com, Hasan with one S, and Kubba is Kubba, so HasanKubba.com. You can find out more about me there. And I'm also very active on LinkedIn, and I'm going to be even more active. I'm also available on the other social networks, etc. But my DMs are open. I read them all myself. I've not got some virtual assistant somewhere or executive assistant doing it for me. I'm still at the stage where I can keep up with it. So it's nice to have that connection. I've always prioritized replying to people who've read the book, email me to say, oh, well, the book has been great, etc. And happy to share advice and jump on discovery calls with people who are serious about this, who've had accomplishments, who have had success. Because that's also a thing, is like, if you've got nothing to speak of and just want to write a book, unless you have a really unique insight or idea, like some innovative thinker, generally you need to have some kind of something to lean on. Like, I've had this success. It doesn't need to be mind-blowing, but you need to have some kind of success to lean on that stands out, where people would want to pick up your book and be like, let me learn from this guy because I love what he says, or let me learn from this, this is the story I want to hear. So yeah, that's the way to just get in touch with me. My DMs and emails and stuff are open. And I just work one-on-one with just a few clients. So just get in touch to find out if I've got availability. And yeah, I'm just enjoying that while I work on my next creative project. So basically, Adam, this is what I do in the afternoons, the client work. And in the mornings is my creative time to work on my next project, which is like a book. But there's more to it than just a book. There's like a documentary series I have in mind that I'm working on, etc. So my next creative time,
Amazing. Well, yeah, keep it a secret for now, but maybe that can be podcast too, right?
Absolutely.
No, it's been absolutely amazing to have you on, Hasan. I really appreciate you spending the time. And HasanKubba.com and LinkedIn. I'll put it all in the show notes so people can click in the description below. But once again, really appreciate your time, my friend.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you. Cheers.
Hey again, and thanks for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard today, don't forget to like, review, and subscribe. And for more goodies, head over to adamshilton.com. Until next time, bye.